Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad on Capitalism Hits Home, an interpersonal update. This is a show about the intersection of capitalism, class, and our personal lives. Terry Crews is a very big, imposing, well-maintained and muscular NFL linebacker, former linebacker, as well as a well-known actor, author, and also a brave person in the Me Too movement who talked about his sexual abuse survival, as well as his survival of child abuse as a little boy. Here he is, testifying against toxic masculinity. He promotes the right of men to be thoughtful, personally accountable, responsible, appropriately vulnerable, introspective, and compassionate people. Here it is.
Toxic masculinity. A lot of people believe that it doesn't exist. It's been a buzzword. It's been one of those things where, you hear it so much that it kind of loses its effect. But I'm going to be real with you guys. Listen, first of all, I know I got on a suit, but I'm going to keep it so real. We're going to get real for this 15 minutes. I just want to tell you what toxic masculinity did to me and how I was a part of it. First of all, I was raised by toxic masculinity. My earliest memory, literally, I probably was around 4 or 5. One of the most vivid memories I've ever had is watching my father punch my mother in the face as hard as he could. And all I could think about when I saw her crumple to the floor was, okay, he says he loves her. Like, what would he do to me? And so I got a lesson. I got a real quick lesson in how the rules go down, okay? Might makes right, all right? And one thing that blew me away is that as I grew older, I started to realize, wait a minute, first of all, in this world of toxic masculinity, when you watch your mother being terrorized and being intimidated and being beaten, you start to realize, okay, wait a minute. First of all, if you can't beat them, you got to join them, okay? Then I realized, me, Terry Crews, I realized and thought in my head that I was more valuable than women simply because I was a man. Because everything in my life growing up told me that. You got to understand, I'm from the hood. I'm from Flint, Michigan. Okay? And things that were told to me, and my first experiences growing up as a young man, probably 12, 13 years old, was like, hey man, you gotta have game. You gotta have game with the women. You have to tell them, you lie to them. In fact, you have people tell you, hey, I had older men tell me, hey man, look, you give a girl 2 good weeks, she'll spend 3 years chasing those 2 good weeks. Pimp mentality was all a part of my young culture, where it was like you weren't even a man until you slept with at least 10 women. Used them, abused them, and threw them away. Lie to them, tell them that you love them, and walk away. You have to understand, because a lot of times, people don't believe it gets that real. But I'm trying to tell you, I was instructed in this. And I was like, but I like her. And they were like, no, you are weak. You do not love this girl. Do not even show your love.
Terry Crews took personal responsibility. He knew he had to change. However, what's happening to men is a social as well as a personal problem. Let's look at what happened to change masculinity. It wasn't just a psychological change. There were huge socioeconomic changes behind it. Between 18 1920 and 1970, white men got used to every generation doing better than the last. They got better and better jobs with family wages that paid for a dependent woman at home, cooking, cleaning, giving emotional service, giving sexual services, taking care of children, taking care of men as a full-time job in the home. White men at that time got 2 wage bonuses because they were in a scarce labor market. Also, they were in a racist and sexist labor market, for which the best jobs were reserved for white men. White men got 1 bonus for their whiteness and another bonus for their maleness. That stopped by the 1970s. It didn't stop because refugees honed in, or because of women, or because of minorities, as Rush Limbaugh would like us to think. Capitalists no longer had a scarce labor market. They could exploit the whole world and make more money. Technology allowed multinational communication systems. It allowed computers, mechanization, robotization, that allowed people to mechanize, computerize, robotize, and most importantly, outsource what were well-paid men's jobs. Those jobs were sent to places like India, China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, where there are 0 or very weak environmental regulations or labor rights. When I say low wages in these places, I'm not kidding. The highest paid workers in that region are the Chinese, who earn $3 on average, $3.60 an hour. And their hours are enormous. The second highest are wage laborers in India, who make between 40 cents and $1.20 an hour. Wages are even lower in Pakistan and Bangladesh. It was capitalists that deserted American workers. And as a reward for that desertion in mechanization and computerization, robotization, and particularly outsourcing, they reaped billions and billions of dollars. They took their billions home, and with their billions, they bought our media. They bought our politicians, which allowed them to elect people who never mentioned that the problems in our society, the problems of decent jobs, frozen wages, and disruptions in what were traditional families, not that I think those were a good idea, but they were certainly disrupted. They were disrupted by capitalists trying to make more money, because that's what capitalists are supposed to do. It wasn't that they were particularly evil humans, it's that they were capitalists, and the point is to give people less and make more. They propagated the idea, which you can see Trump doing so successfully, as Ivanka Trump hired people for 44 cents an hour in China to make her fashion shoes. They propagated the idea that the problem with male wages, with white male wages, was that refugees were encroaching on America, that uppity women were encroaching on men's jobs and taking them, that minorities were muscling in to take men's jobs. Now, it is true that as men's jobs were being exported, the movement, both the women's movement and the Black Power movements, got a lot of government money to push those movements to be a gender-only and a race-only movement, lest class come into it, which gave people the idea that it's race and gender that were the problem, rather than that capitalism is the problem. Capitalism exported well-paid white male wages, which then disrupted the usual traditional family of dependent wives and children and men who earned family wages. It is ironic that focus on the family and other right-wing organizations say that they support the family while they supported exactly that. Capitalists getting away with denying decent wages and outsourcing them, which impoverished families and forced women into the labor force. In the 1960s and 70s, women poured into the labor force out of necessity. We poured into the labor force because we needed to support our families and children. That, in turn, made a huge difference in male-female relationships. When a woman needs to go out to work and then comes home from work tired, she's a whole lot less enthusiastic about doing all the housework, childcare, and being available to make herself look sexy, do sex work, and do the emotional work of supporting her husband, whose emotional needs are greater because his masculinity is being assaulted by his low wages. So that women decided, no, we don't want this, and left. That's why 70% of divorces are now initiated by women. And divorces are by far most numerous in red states, where there are fundamentalist religions that emphasize, as the Southern Baptist Convention does, that men should be dominant and women should be subordinate, and where traditional sex roles are enforced. That's who gets the most divorces. As well as that's where the fragile masculinity is. Make America great again is make America what it was in the 60s, where white supremacy was assumed economically, where women were subordinated in the home and dependent on men, and where a man's home was his feudal manor, where he had people taking care of him. And that's no longer the case. And in those areas of the most fragile masculinity are the areas of blue-collar Trump supporters. One of the things that's happened is that men have been deceived by Fox News, right-wing politicians, and even people like Jordan Peterson, who seem to have great compassion for men and blame their problems on women. Women have changed. We have entered the labor force. We have fought for wage parity. Even though we don't have it, we have been fighting for it. But we were pushed out of the household by capitalists. And that has changed our sex roles. And it has changed whether we want to be married to men or not. Also, the pill, which happened around the same time, which came out, allows people to be sexual without having to be married. And changes in mores have changed radically. In the early 1960s, 5% of children were born outside of a marriage. Now 42% of children are born outside of a marriage. And children born outside of a marriage are accepted. Single parenthood is accepted. A lot of women choose to be single parents, even though single parenthood for women is one of the indicators of poverty. And American children are the poorest people in America. Second poorest are single mothers who have one wage and a lower wage on which to support a family. The whole family scene is up for grabs. And with it, the male role, which has changed so radically, is up for grabs. With this changed role, there is both confusion and upset and rage, as we have seen, with all the mass shootings and all the shootings that aren't mass shootings. One out of, well, let's put it this way, the biggest cause of homicide of women between 15 and 44 is angry husbands or boyfriends. This is both a tragedy for men and also a huge and wonderful opportunity. Just as Terry Crews explained, that men can be full people now, that men have to be vulnerable, introspective, know their own feelings, share their feelings, know that they need each other as well as they need their partners. And when they have a family, they need the love and support of their children. Relationships have changed. Instead of the man being in charge, there's now an opportunity for people to be equals and the deepest and most profound of friends, as well as lovers and workers together. With the new vulnerability that's now available to men, a much deeper connection is possible. Connection in intimate relationships, connection in emotional friendships, connection in groups. Men are particularly isolated from groups and from each other. Women have more intimate talks with each other when they meet by chance and didn't even know each other, when they see each other in the bathroom. A woman who goes into a ladies' room can say to another woman in the mirror, "Oh, I'm afraid I look fat in this. My boyfriend is so critical," and they can get support. Even if they will never see each other again after those few seconds in the women's room. Men would never do that. Say to some guy at the men's room, "How do I look in this? Do I look fat in this? You know, my girlfriend just insulted me." And get the support of a man standing next to him. Since men's former intimacy and usual intimacy is allowed only with women, it allowed men to mix the closeness and emotion that they could show with sex, which is a need that men are allowed to have. Changed relationships can allow men to have the whole spectrum of human needs that are actually there, from the need for a hug, from the need for emotional support, from the need to a pat on the back, from the need to cry, from the need to just sit and hold hands, for the need to be sharing with friends who understand, because they've been there too. So the tragedy of American men is now an opportunity for mental health, since mental health is all about connection. The deeper, the better. Men have a chance now to connect as equals with women, with other men, with children. We can make America great again, and even greater than it's ever been, on the basis of dropping capitalist values that allow people to do anything for a profit, and allowing one group of people to feel that they can dominate another, men to dominate women, whites to dominate blacks, parents to dominate and be authoritarian or violent with children. We also can dump capitalism and the misery that it brings when decisions about the deepest thing are inconsequential because the only decision is profit. In Europe, where there are powerful socialist and communist parties, outsourcing is much less allowed. In Germany, as I think I've told you before, but you may have forgotten, the German Metal Workers Union, a powerful left union, just won a 22-hour work week so that they could get family, personal, and work balance. In Germany, jobs are not allowed to be exported, outsourced. If a capitalist wants to outsource a job, he or she has to make sure that what the decision is made with the community in mind, with worker representatives in mind, and with all the ecological outflow that might happen in mind. In Sweden, if a company wants to outsource, they have to get an equivalent job for everyone in their company. So most just decide to produce a different thing if what they produced wasn't successful, rather than to outsource and cause themselves having to get everybody who works there another job. America could do that too if we had socialist parties and communist parties, if we had socialists like Bernie Sanders or Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez with powerful positions. We could have that too, and we should. We should do that to rescue men from the pain that they're feeling as the wall of masculinity dissolves. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. This episode has been brought to you by Democracy at Work. Please support our work. Visit our website at democracyatwork.info.